Okay, good morning. So let's talk about unleashing your web skills on native. It's about front-end web technology you can use building native apps. But first I want to take you on a little roller coaster. If you tried native development already and you have a web developer background, you might have experienced things like that. But first, as a web developer, you're in your natural habitat and oh, no.
Everything's gonna be all right now. I got this.
You're confident, right?
Know who I am?
No problem. Let's do this.
What the hell are you talking about?
You'll see!
Yeah, no problem. You know, because you're confident with HTML and CSS and JavaScript, no problems. SAS maybe. NPM has no any mysteries for you at all. But then you're trying for the first time native development. And probably this was my experience. A little hesitant, what's going on? Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. What did I do? Yeah, no. Ah, man. App stores. Provisioning files, though. Oh, so awesome. Java? Any Java developers? Or some history? Brave man. Or Kotlin, or Objective-C, or Swift. Oh man. So for me, it was a nice step to go into the web developer as a web developer with NativeScript. And it's more like this. First a little bit hesitant, but yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, I got this. I feel powerful, you know. So, you still have to learn the app stores. Provisioning files are still there. You have to learn a little bit about NativeScript, but it's just, say, pouring sugar on top of your JavaScript and your CSS and HTML, because you know HTML, you know CSS, you know JavaScript, you know SAS maybe, and you know NPM. So you might gonna even love it. Talking about love, I love you being here, but who am I? My name is Rowdy. You can find me on Twitter with my full name. I live in Gouda, the Netherlands. If you're not from the Netherlands, you can thank us later for inventing Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. You're welcome. If you were in my session yesterday, you know I love superhero movies, so it's going to be filled with that again. You already saw an example of that. I'm a freelance web and app developer. I work for Dutch insurance company Nationale-Nederlanden, where we develop a pension app with NativeScript. And I'm also a Progress developer expert for NativeScript. Progress is the company behind NativeScript. And in that way, I can talk on conference like this, sharing my experiences and love for NativeScript. But NativeScript might not be the holy grail for you. So let's go on a mobile app framework decision guide. Ask yourself this question first. Do you want or need a native user interface and native performance? If you don't care, you can go with something called PhoneGap Cordova with Ionic. It's essentially, say, a website encapsulated in a native app. It can be fine for your purpose. But if you do want it, and do you have too much money and too much time? I work for an enterprise. We sometimes have too much money and too much time. Well, maybe a few years ago, not anymore, but you can go full native. Native iOS, native Android. It will get you awesome results if you do it right, but you have to do it twice. And you have to make sure that the developers on iOS and Android actually talk to each other, because we've seen things going in different directions. But probably most of us don't have too much money and time. So, next question, do you potentially want or need to share code with the web or use web technologies? If the answer is no, you can actually choose for something called Xamarin from Microsoft, but you have to know .NET or C#. Or Google's new love child, Flutter. You have to learn Dart for that. But I'm a web developer, I don't know any of this stuff, so let's go JavaScript. Do you want to use modern JavaScript, or don't you really care? If you don't care and don't need to, you can use Titanium. That's a JavaScript platform that also will generate native apps. But there are some downsides, like you can't use NPM, no ES6, 7, 8 support, so you're a bit limited. Want to go modern? Do you know and like React? I don't. I don't know it. I don't know if I don't like it, but I don't know it. But if you do, you can go React Native. They have a similar solution to NativeScript, but they're still in the early stages of that. So, if you don't know or like React, we continue to something that will make you a Supergirl, a Superwoman, or a Superman, whatever you prefer. And that tooling is NativeScript. So what is NativeScript? NativeScript is an open source framework. You create apps with JavaScript markup, that could be XML or HTML, and CSS. The markup and the CSS together will generate a real native interface. So if you have a slider on your screen, it's a real native slider. And the JavaScript will run in virtual machines to make the interaction with the native APIs possible. And if you're brave enough, and I have an example of that, you can even use native code, either Objective-C or Java, directly inside your JavaScript. It's cross-platform, so you develop for both iOS and Android on the same time, but you're still capable of making differences between those. As I said, it's backed by a software company called Progress that's been around since the 80s of the previous century. And it supports Android 4.2 and higher and iOS 7 and higher. Okay, fine, you think, well, nice, but get me up to speed. Well, I could tell you install Homebrew like this and install Node.js, and then you can install the NativeScript CLI, run some scripts, then you have the possibility to run TNS commands, to create new apps, to build, to add platforms, to run, and yeah, you can read it in the docs. I won't waste your time here explaining a lot of things about it, because there are great docs out there that get you up to speed. There's even a free book out there, learning you NativeScript from the beginning. And there are great courses out there for my friend Alex at NativeScripting.com. There is something called NativeScript Sidekick, which provides you with ready-to-go master detail templates, for instance, or tabs, or with a drawer. And you can even run cloud builds on this. But the easiest way to start is to go to play.nativescript.org, because you will be represented with a QR code you can scan with a special app, and you can start trying things out, as you see they're doing here. I love Playground. It says if you hit the button, there will be a button coming on your device here. You press that button and it shows there. So you can experiment with it without even installing software on your desktop or your laptop. And this is also great for sharing problems or solutions in this way. Of course, there's a forum. You can post your questions and answer them, or have them answered. And there's a big Slack community. So you're not alone out there. Well, let's look at the parts of this equation. This is Spider-Man, so sorry for the lame joke. Markup is like on the web. If you look at the markup, it might seem very similar to what you do on the web. On top you have an action bar, which just say native elements, and below that you have a stack layout. You always have to use a layout because otherwise they don't know how to render the screen. I will explain a little bit about that later. And you can see we have a button, a switch, and a segmented bar, and a progress, and a slider, and even a date picker. With this HTML alone, or XML, you can generate these interactions. And on your left side is Android, and on your right side is iOS. Even put in a button event that will generate an action slide, or an action sheet. So without having to do many stuff, you can already make use of these components. They might not look that nice, but we have something else for that. As I work for an insurance company, we have a lot of data input. And that's where TEXTFIELD comes in. It's similar like input type text, for instance, on the web. This is how you use it. You can use a hint like you do on the web with a placeholder. And there are a lot of built-in attributes already. So I can set auto-capitalization. You have these choices, but if I enter my email address, for instance, I hate it when the first letter becomes uppercase. So fortunately, there's also a none. Autocorrect, everyone's favorite, but not when I'm entering my name, because that's always something else than that it really is. So you can also say autocorrect true or false. And this is also very useful. The keyboard type, you can set the software keyboard by just defining what keyboard you like. So the top three are more or less the same, but you also have the email to have that, and URL. And this is also, again, an example. On the left you have Android, on the right you have iOS, which will show you the soft keyboards. The Android is a bit better on datetime, number, and phone. But that's what the native operating system gives you to use to work with. And there are ways to create your own, but most of the time it will be sufficient. And there are even more attributes like alignment or visibility. You would use that with, for instance, a Boolean to say, well, if someone hits this button or enters something in this input field, this text field, then the other one should also show, for instance. Or max length if you don't want more characters than 10 or something like that. I mentioned layouts, and there are quite a few layouts available. The easiest one, and that's the stack layout, it will just go from top to bottom. You can set the orientation to horizontal, so it will go from left to right. Well, the absolute layout is just the same as on the web. You can set coordinates where to start. And one that's used quite often is the dock layout, in which you can set a top and a bottom bar, for instance, and have them stay there, and just use the other space for the content. Grid layout is a bit like CSS grid and a bit like table on the web. And I will explain a little bit more about that later. You have the wrap layout, just tries to fill up, and if there's not enough space anymore, it will continue on the next line. Or if you set orientation to vertical, it will go from top to bottom and then to the right. And flexbox layout, that's really awesome to use also. It's been there not that long, but it's a quite nice way to see that web technology moved on to native also. So I got two examples just to explain a little bit about it. This is the dock layout. And as you can see, 1 and 2 have a fixed height. Number 3 has a fixed width. And because I put number 4 on the bottom and said dock is left, and set stret last child means that use all available space for that one. And the grid layout works like table and CSS grid. The most important thing is that when you define the rows and the columns, you can set either a pixel width or height. So that's the 100 here. Or you can set it to auto, it will just use the space it needs. Or you can set an asterisk, a star, saying, well, use whatever is left here. So that's what's happening in this case. And you can also use row span and col spans here. And what we usually do is combine different layouts to make it look the best it can. All right, time for some happy accidents. Because we're going to look at styling CSS. A very large subset of CSS is supported, but you have to keep in mind that you don't work with ems or rems or pixels or points. You're using device-independent pixels, so you just set the number and you don't have to think about the unit. You can use it application-wide, just set it, say a label is always font this and font size that, but you can be very specific for a page or even use inline. And as I mentioned, you can also do it separately for Android or iOS. I wouldn't recommend it, but there might be edge cases that you need to fix something. You can also use CSS animations and Sass. If you want to use functions or variables, if you have a corporate color, for instance, you don't want to repeat it 100 times in every CSS file, you can use Sass to generate that CSS for you. If you're not that good at CSS, there are NativeScript core teams. Some are nice, some are meh, but it's a nice starting point for you. I think this is better than NativeScript Theme Builder. You can go online, check in either iOS or Android simulations how your styling would look, and you can then download your theme and use it in your app. So you saw some HTML and CSS, and with that knowledge alone, so no JavaScript at all, you can make something, I think, very nice, and I hope you share my vision on that. You probably know the tab view in apps. With this HTML code, I can create a tab view with 3 tabs saying title Rocket Raccoon, Harley Quinn, and the Hulk. And I use some CSS classes to make it look pretty. If you look at that CSS, full means use the whole background available. And the separate classes just means use these images for the background. This way, I'm saying use an image that's already packed with my app. So it's in the bundle, but you can also use HTTP or HTTPS URLs for that. And it will look like this. Native on Android, native on iOS. With a few simple lines of code, you can sell it for a few €1,000 to your client, probably. Okay, the third part of it. Sorry, 4 fantastic choices. I know, lame jokes, sorry. You can use plain old friendly JavaScript. You can use TypeScript. And if you don't know TypeScript, TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript, which makes it easier to create classes. And one thing that's very important to me is that you can set types, so you don't try to combine a number and a string, which I've done many times. But you can also use Vue.js, the new kid on the block also. It's been implemented for a few months now, and it's gaining a lot of interest. It has its own logo also, of course. And my personal favorite, Angular, also again with its own logo. And NativeScript and the Angular core team are working closely together to make it the best experience for you to use Angular with NativeScript. I'm not going deep into how the JavaScript works because it's just JavaScript, how you would write it on the web also, you can use it. But I'm trying something with native code here. And I'm doing this together with Angular. So in my case, a typical structure of an NativeScript Angular app would look like this. I have an app directory, I have components, and in there I have a slider with HTML file for the layout, the TypeScript file for the functionality, and the CSS file for the styling, for the beauty. And I need a routing module and a module to bind it all together. So in that HTML file, it's pretty simple. I have an action bar on top. I have a stack layout with a slider in there. And it has a value 70. That means 70% of the track. I have a TypeScript file that is just boilerplate, actually. It doesn't do anything. It just refers to use template URL, the HTML file we just created, and for styling, use the CSS file. That's all. And the CSS file is also very interesting. Have an action bar, which is red with white letters. Have some padding, just it doesn't go to the sides too much, and have a background color of red on the slider. And you get this marvelous slider. Wow, right? I want to make this more beautiful, say more superhero-like. So I insert something there after the slider-icon, which is in Angular an attribute directive, and it will change the appearance or the behavior of an element. This doesn't go like that, so I have to create something called directive. So a directive.ts, a TypeScript file for that. The things highlighted here, again, is boilerplate. You can find it anywhere. It just makes sure that you can reference to that slider icon selector. Now it's getting interesting because my solution for this only works on iOS. So I import is iOS from the platform, and the platform is the device itself. And if it's iOS, then I can access that element directly using this .l.nativeElement.iOS. And that .iOS means that I have access to all the iOS functionality there. If I would do this for Android, I would use .android. And the real magic is here. Because now I have a UI slider, and this set thumb image for state image named UI control state.num, that's Objective-C. I don't know any of that stuff, but I can use it directly here in my code. I have to make sure that that icon directive is known to the component, so I have to insert it in the slider module. And then I've created something. It could be Daddy's little monster, it could be something very nice. And this is how it looks. I have Captain America's shield there as a slider. But I went a little more overboard because this is boring, right? So I thought, well, it has some delay. Yes. What if I make that slider also control the opacity of the background image? Also start a sound or a song, the theme song. And you can probably hear it. Also the slider makes sure that the volume goes up or down. That takes a little bit of JavaScript, of course, but you can do, with a few lines of code, you can do pretty awesome stuff. Okay. These guys and girls. Packages and libraries, because you don't want to build everything yourself, right? You know you can do everything better than any other developer, but sometimes you have to be sensible and use stuff from others. So you can use Node Package Manager. NPM. If you don't know it, there are ready-to-use JavaScript modules. There are about 650,000 packages of free reusable code out there. Not saying 650,000 good packages, but you have to cherry pick that. If you find a package, you can install it just like you would on the web with npm install. Don't forget the -- save, because if you check your project into Git and a colleague is working on it, he won't have that package name if he runs npm install. So always use that save. As an example, we use, for instance, Crypto.js. Our customers enter their personal data, and we save it locally on the device using local storage. But you want to have that encrypted, so you can use this package for that. We also use accounting to format numbers and money, and an email validator for, well, validating an email address. It's very easy to install and very easy to use. Just follow the guidelines of that package. If you want to go any further, you can use Android Arsenal or Cocoa Pods. Those are libraries for Android and iOS specific. I want to point out one we are using very frequently. And that's a specific package for Angular, and that's NGX-TRANSLATE, to make your app multilingual. It's an internationalization library, and it's easy to it takes a few steps to implement, but I have a blog post on that to follow 7 steps. But then, if you do that, you can switch easily between languages. So to make sure you don't have any hard-coded text on your pages, it's all in one place in a JSON file. And if I start a new app, I always start immediately with using this. And such a JSON file would look like this, for instance. This is the home page of my app, the starter page, which sets the title of the action bar, a little bit of text, and the rest are button text. And how you can use it is one-way data binding in Angular and using a pipe to transform it. You can even use variables if you want to. But in this simple case, this is how you would use it. And you get something like this. It's now in English. And when I hit the Dutch button, it translates to Dutch. Easy like that, and back again. Okay, NPM packages. But what if I want to do something more? Make use of APIs on your device, like camera, for instance. You can go to NativeScript plugins. As I said, if it's not providing if the core modules don't provide everything you need, you can use plugins, or you can create one your own. I have a very simple example how to create one. There's no way getting the version number of your app through the core modules. So you can create a plugin for that. And essentially, you need to create a few files. One for iOS, one for Android, and something called a definition file, which is the entry point for both. So in the iOS one, I create a class called version number, and if I run get version, it will do some iOS Objective-C magic. The Android one is a little bit more complicated, but essentially is running Java commands to get the version number. And in the end, I have a definition file, just say get version. And that will redirect to the appropriate iOS or Android version. To be able to use it, you have to make a package JSON, give it a name and the main entry of that plugin. And then you can install it. If you have that package published on NPM, you use the one above. If you're still working locally, you can also edit from a local point of view. And if you use TNS, that stands for Telerik NativeScript, that's the CLI, it will make sure it's also -- safe in your package JSON, so the next time it's still working. And if you want to use it, you can import version number and call it like this. Create a new version number and get the version. I'm not a plugin author myself, but there are a lot of people out there that do. And if you go to market.nativescript.org, there are a lot of plugins there you can search on, and there are a lot of good ones. And I will show you some in a minute. Actually, I'm going to show you now. I also have code examples after this, but regarding the time, you can look at it yourself later, because I think you rather see the demos than the code. If you were in my talk yesterday, you remember this guy. I'm going to switch to my mobile phone now. Hope it works. You don't have to use Twitter. That worked yesterday, not today. Sorry. This is the home screen I showed you earlier. You might think that the projector is not that good, but there's actually a gradient I'm using there. That's one of the plugins I'm using. With the latest version of NativeScript, it's not necessary anymore to use that plugin. It's now in the core, so you see that. Oh, sorry, my microphone went down. So you see that things that are very useful for other users will end up eventually in the core also. So the robot, I'm going to scan and probably scan all your mobile phones too, but I hope it will only pick this one. It has found it, fortunately, and I can connect to it. Yeah. So, what plugins I'm using here? That's Bluetooth. And if I go to the controls, you might recognize Font Awesome there. So I'm also using two things called NGX font icon. Let me take a sip of water. Thank you. So you can control sounds he makes, but you can also control his belly color. So give him a little rainbow. And yeah, I think he's liking you today. He starts winking to you. So you can control all these things. You can control all these things, but the most important thing is that it can write, right? I'm going to do something stupid again on the table like yesterday. Can move it forward, make it turn a little bit, but it's more nice to use a plugin called NativeScript accelerometer, if I'm pronouncing it right. So I can use my device to make it turn. And I'm forgetting something important, like yesterday. Because we're in Amsterdam, we have to celebrate being in Amsterdam. Yep. That's the problem with using the solar. Yeah, I cannot pronounce it, but it will follow every movement. So this is the most safe one, I think. And then I have to catch him and, sorry guy, kill him. Okay. Let's move on to another part. I'm not even sure it's recording now. Speech recognition. I'm praying to God that this demo is working. because I'm using NativeScript speech recognition. And I can say, for instance, please introduce yourself.
Hallo allemaal, mijn naam is Jan. Het is geweldig om hier in Amsterdam te mogen zijn.
I will continue in English so you all can understand what I'm saying. So call me John instead, please.
Okay, also NativeScript text-to-speech. Let's try, how's the weather in my hometown?
The current weather in Gouda, the Netherlands, is mostly cloudy, 22 degrees Celsius. The forecast is partly cloudy throughout the day.
This is actually not using a NativeScript plugin, but it's using the Angular HTTP client to connect to darksky.net to get, based on coordinates, get the weather forecast. Of course, I'm using text-to-speech to say it to you again. Maybe this one. How do I get home by train?
Don't leave the Dutch PHP conference yet, Rowdy, but just in case, this is the route.
So what you see is that it will start up, in this case, Google Maps. And it's already plotted the route to my home, or say the station in Gouda. You can also use Apple Maps, if you're on Apple, or use Google Maps on the web. Okay, another one. Let's share a selfie.
That's a nice idea. Let's take a picture together and put it on Twitter.
Go on, guys. Wave with me. I want to retake that. I'm looking really weird there. Maybe that's my natural look, but somebody says yes, thank you. Okay, wave and smile, guys and girls. Yeah, that's better. So this is NativeScript camera I'm using. And if I say use this image, I'm going to something called that's called NativeScript social share. So I can easily post this on Twitter. Now I have to learn to type. Okay, it's posted. And with 5 minutes to go, can we watch a movie trailer?
I know you love superhero movies. Let's watch a part of the Deadpool 2 movie trailer. Please rotate your device.
This is using NativeScript video player.
Don't call it a comeback. I've been here for years, rocking my pants, putting suckers in fear, making the tears rain down like a monsoon. Listen to the bass go.
Tell me they got that in slow motion.
I'm gonna knock you out.
Doing the right thing is messy. But if you want to fight for what's right, sometimes you have to fight dirty.
All right. If you want to know how to do this, it's in the slides. The code for instance, running a video is very, very simple. Let's hope we can return to this one. Ah, yeah. Psychedelic. Oh, we're at the end of the presentation, so it's not that. Well, maybe we can look between the lines. So this is all the code I was mentioning. You can see it later on. This is kind of spooky, right? This is also a movie I'm looking forward to. That's Venom. And yeah, this makes it a little bit harder. It says, dankjewel Amsterdam. You can find me on Twitter at Rowdy Rabouw. The most important thing is if you go to 2xr.nl/dpcon, if you're fast enough or take a picture fast enough, you will see that here. The slides are there. Also links to the demo code. You can try it out on NativeScript Playground. And please leave some nice feedback for me, positive or negative. I don't mind. I just want to know what you're thinking of it. And with that, I'm saying thank you and enjoy your lunch.